Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Welcome back to Sacked in the Morning. I'm your host Caleb, and today we're talking all things Newcastle United, their transfer situation, their PSR issues, and how they may look come ahead of next season. So, from July the 1st, Newcastle United should be free of PSR issues. The window in which they spent heavily, in which they accumulated 73 million in losses, the window where they bought Isak, the window where they bought, for example, other players, Nick Pope, Sven Botman, etc. That accounting period is set to leave. Newcastle United will, once that accounting period finishes on June the 30th, they should then be set to spend quite a lot of money. Now, obviously, Newcastle United aren't completely in any PSR issues this summer. They are still tight. They're sort of in the amber section in terms of PSR. So they may still look to do some deals. Eddie Howe has come out and said that they are going to be looking at targeting other clubs. There is one club in particular they could look to target, and that is Aston Villa. It has come out today of Sky Sports Switzerland, Sasha Tavarelli, hopefully I pronounced that right, that Newcastle United are looking at Jacob Ramsey. He's not seen as indispensable, and that a move of potentially £30 million could be enough. Now, Newcastle United did experience this last summer, where they didn't want to let go of the likes of Elliot Anderson. And Newcastle United, if they didn't have PSR issues, they probably wouldn't have sold Elliot Anderson, or if they did, they wouldn't have sold him for as little as 35. The same here is for Jacob Ramsey. Villa probably value him around 50 million, but the closer to that deadline it gets, the closer that Aston Villa will have to sort of put it to the side and say, you know what, we have to do this, it's pure profit, we're going to have to sell, or we're going to face a points deduction. Given how close it was this season, the fact that, for example, they missed out on goal difference, I mean, if Villa were to get hit by maybe 4 points, that could have eventually cost them Champions League next season. So they're not going to be willing to break PSR, then I'm probably not going to be willing to take a points deduction. So this is something that definitely could pick up. What makes this more interesting is that Craig Hope of the Mail, a reliable source with regards to Newcastle United, has come out and said that Newcastle United could be looking to offload two key midfielders, Joe Willock being one of them and Sean Longstaff being the other. Now, these two haven't featured that much for Newcastle United. Sean Longstaff's barely featured for Newcastle. Willock, when he has played, he has had injuries, but he also has struggled. Towards the end of the season when Joe Linton got injured, Willock wasn't really able to step up to maybe the levels you've seen him before. And I think Eddie Howe's been really ruthless this summer, and he's sort of saying, if we can sell these players, I want to get better squad depth in. Jacob Ramsey, maybe a year ago, was being tipped as absolutely fantastic star. He did struggle this season. One thing that's really interesting about Jacob Ramsey, he's only scored 1 goal this season and 1 goal last season. His numbers have been really low, and obviously, when you're sort of struggling with injuries, this can happen. He hasn't been in the team this much. Morgan Rogers, the one that's really hit the light. If it was between Morgan Rogers and Jacob Ramsey, I'm sure Villa would prefer to sell Ramsey just because Rogers, at the moment, seems like that player to take them to the next level. But under Eddie Howe's guidance, you've seen the way he's developed young players. If Jacob Ramsey is somebody that they want, it's probably someone that they'll get. And I think if Newcastle were to get him for 30 million, then they'll try to snap your hand off. There probably will be other clubs coming in, like a Tottenham Hotspur, maybe Manchester United, I'm not really sure. But it'll be something to keep your eye out as we get closer to that June deadline. Now, an interesting one which has broken over the last couple of days is Anthony Elanga. So we all know, I made a video on this, that Brian Burma looks set to be going to Manchester United. So it has been broken by Sky, or it was originally broken by the Daily Mail, that Newcastle United are looking at Anthony Elanga. They put an inquiry in for him. Sky then further back this, saying that Elanga is one of 3 or 4 wingers Newcastle United are interested in. Newcastle United obviously lost Milka Amaran in January. They're going to be looking at strengthening that right wing position. Jacob Murphy's done really well this season, got the second most amount of assists in the Premier League, and Elanga got the third most amount. Elanga's 23, I think Murphy's entering his 30s now. So it is somebody that Newcastle United are looking at. They did look at him last summer. They had a bid rejected on deadline day. So this is going to be something that Newcastle United, like Jacob Ramsey, they've had a long-standing interest in him. It's obviously someone Eddie Howe looks at and goes, right, maybe I can develop him. Looking at his stats this season, he got 6 goals and 11 assists. Last season, he got 5 goals and 9 assists. So he's consistently hitting around 10 assists a season. I think he would thrive under Eddie Howe. I think one thing about Elanga, when Ralph Rangnick was there, he said it, Elanga is one of the only players who works really hard. Elanga does a lot of stuff off the field, his sort of calisthenics, the gym work he does. He always runs, he always tries his best. And that's the sort of energy he's going to need to play in an Eddie Howe pressing team. I think with how quick he is, Newcastle are going to be an absolute threat on transitions, with Gordon on the left, Elanga on the right. and obviously Isak up top. I think it'll be a very exciting signing, and if it would be a good signing. Now, the only thing that I think will interesting about this deal is how much it's going to cost, because Forest aren't in a bad position. You know, they could potentially even get promoted to the Europa League depending on what's happening with Crystal Palace. So I think north of 50 million is probably what Forest are going to be looking at. Whether Newcastle say that's too much, me personally, I think that the going rate for these sort of wingers these days is 50 to 60 million. I think Mbeumo's going for plus 60. If Semenya was to go, he'd probably be going for around 50 to 60. So Forest are within their rights to demand what they want. I think 50 million is a bit much for Elanga. I think 40 to 45 is a fair deal, but Newcastle are going to have to pay a bit more because he's Premier League proven, and that's just the way it is. But I feel like he'll be a fantastic option. And if you're going into next season with Barnes and Gordon on the left, you're going on to the right side with Elanga and Murphy. Bearing in mind Elanga can also play on the left, it gives a lot of flexibility out wide. The only problem is the striker. They've only got Alexander Isak who can sort of step up, but Sula isn't someone that anyhow trusts. He's barely given a minute this season. Callum Wilson is getting towards the end of his career. He didn't score a single goal in the league this season. So that links you on to my next target, João Pedro. So this was broken a few days ago by Sky that Newcastle United are interested in signing João Pedro. So João Pedro got 10 goals this season, 6 assists in 27 games. He got 9 goals and 3 assists in the season before that. So one interesting thing that Sky put out is that João Pedro wants to be the starting striker, or which could be a potential stumbling block in the move. Obviously, Alexander Isak is probably not going to be dropped for him. He's going to be seen as an understudy to Alexander Isak. But I think one interesting thing about João Pedro is he could be a second striker, or Newcastle United could change it and play him in the 10 role. So they play a 4-3-3. Let's say Joe Linton's missing, for example. They could go with a double base of Bruno and Tonali and then play João Pedro in that sort of 10 role. So João Pedro has, that's what Sky reporting, that he wants to start, pretty much be a starter. He played 27 games for Brighton last season and 31 before that. So he's not, that's in the league alone. So he's not necessarily starting every game for Brighton. I don't know if that was because of injuries. I'm not really sure, to be honest. But if he does come to Newcastle, they're guaranteed to play 38 games in the league. They're guaranteed at least 8 games in the Champions League. And realistically, Newcastle United will probably at least make the 5th round of maybe the FA Cup and the Carabao Cup. So that is an extra 6 games. So that's already, I think, 51 games at least Newcastle United will play. Alexander Isak has shown that he will get injured at times in the season. So he can't play 50 games realistically, especially Newcastle are going to be playing pretty much Wednesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday. There's not going to be any rest up until December minimum, or up until January, to be honest with you. Maybe December, let's say that. So he's going to get a lot of game time at Newcastle. So I don't think he really needs to worry. It does say that he's good friends with Bruno Gomes, and he got the famous "Here we go" a couple of years ago. Obviously, the move didn't materialise. He said that he was quite upset that it didn't happen here. They were going to Brighton, he did really well. Newcastle ended up signing Isak. I don't think there was any regrets over that signing. But so João Pedro is another long-standing target that Newcastle United have had, going back to the likes of Elanga and Jacob Ramsey. So it's really interesting. Eddie Howe's sort of looking at players that he's identified before and going, right, he saw a vision for them before, he's seen them now. I think with João Pedro, there is a potential position change. We've seen Eddie Howe play sort of free at the back towards the end of the season, whether that was because of injuries, potentially, I think so. I mean, playing him as a second striker, he could playing him as a cam, I think there's a lot of potential as a replacement striker for Isak. His versatility is very exciting. The sticky part again comes with the transfer fee. So it's been reported Brighton might be looking for 70 million euros. I think that's around 60 million pounds. That is a lot of money for João Pedro, given that he's not necessarily going to start every game for Newcastle. There's been reports that Saudi clubs are going to be putting in bids for him. Whether João Pedro would be interested in that, I'm not sure. I think João Pedro would love a move to Newcastle. I think he'd fancy it. I think he'll get good game time here. I think Eddie Howe would improve him. There's been some questions about his attitude. I don't really believe that. People saying the same thing about Anthony Gordon before he came to Newcastle. Like how well he did. So I think João Pedro probably will leave Brighton this summer. They've been linked with another striker. I'm sorry if I forgot his name. Sky said they put a bid in for £34 million for the Olympiacos striker. So I don't think João Pedro will move this summer. I think Newcastle will be a good fit for him. It's a step up. Brighton are always going to be sort of that team competing in sort of 8th, 9th place, maybe trying to push for Europa League, but they're never really going to be that team that kicks on into the Champions League, in my opinion. Newcastle United have got Champions League 2 of the last 3 seasons now, so And if Newcastle United were to go into next season with three improvements in the attacking areas, Jacob Ramsey for 30 million, João Pedro for let's say 60, and Elanga for 50, that is a lot of money they've spent. That is, if I can do my maths correctly, 140 million, but that is three really good players they're bringing in. They'll probably potentially make maybe 20 million for Willock and maybe 10 million for Longstaff, so that's 30 million there in terms of money they'll get. So they'll obviously be looking at a goalkeeper as well and another centre back. Marguerite's the most obvious one. And obviously, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think Marguerite's future will depend on whether Palace make the Europa League or not. If they don't make the Europa League, I think his value does drop because then that means Palace are going to lose our money in terms of revenue, etc. And the goalkeeper situation, I don't think goalkeeper is a priority for Newcastle. I understand that maybe they want someone who's more comfortable with his feet, but when I look at Nick Pope in big games, what he does is he keeps the ball at the back of the net. The amount of times keepers for maybe Chelsea or Manchester United this season have cost them, they're good with their feet, but the amount of times they haven't been reliable. Newcastle have been linked with the likes of James Trafford. Is a risk. He's not necessarily proven in the Premier League, so it's interesting. But if Newcastle were to strengthen outfield positions, especially in the offensive areas of Ramsey, João Pedro and Elanga, I think that puts them in a great position for next season. It gives them a lot of squad depth. They've got two good left wingers, two good right wingers. Up top they'll have Isak and João Pedro. In terms of the midfield, João Pedro is obviously an option there. Jacob Ramsey there. Tonali, Bruno, Joelinton and Lewis Miley. That's a lot of squad depth Newcastle have in my opinion. They've got experience now. Elanga's played Champions League football with Manchester United. João Pedro's already played Europa League with Brighton. Jacob Ramsey obviously scored in the Champions League this season with Aston Villa, so they are getting a bit of European experience as well. I think the future is very exciting for Newcastle, and I think next season, obviously trophies is always a priority, but now that Newcastle have sort of broken that trophy duck, I think they need to make sure they get Champions League next season. If they get Champions League next season, that's 2 seasons in a row. That will really, really help any sort of FFP, PSR issues they have. I think a good season for Newcastle next season will be make sure they get at least to the playoff round of the Champions League. Maybe try and win the FA Cup and finish top 5. I think, again, because we've got so many teams in Europe, that top 5 should be enough for Champions League. So it's really exciting, and these players, in my opinion, will develop really well under Eddie Howe. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. It'd be interesting to see what Newcastle United fans think. I think they have absolutely incredible potential, and now that they can spend a bit of money, it'll be interesting to see what they do. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching.